Savers, I don't think I even got quite halfway through. I didn't actually go back and watch the rest until the first time that we did a Digimon panel, and I was like, well, I need to know what I'm talking about. But again, it was very difficult for me to get into it because, again, I didn't like the characters. And this was I actively disliked them because I just don't like any of these people. I'm sorry. And so it was very difficult to get through that first arc because they're the sorts of stories that really rely on the characters to carry them, because the plot as a whole, as you come to find out, doesn't really kick in until the second half, particularly the last arc of this series. And so if you, having given up and gotten bored, I didn't get to see that until I sat down in marathons to work out this panel. And I am so glad I did, because if you haven't seen Savers, you need to know that it actually does get pretty good at the end, I think. Again, this is a series that concentrates a lot on world building. It's another thing that it really explores the ideas of what a life in a digital world would be like, and actually explores the implications of that world and ours interacting with each other. And so not only do you get a sense of there's a history in this world, it's a culture going on, but we also get to see the culture shock of that culture interacting with ours and how we would react to that. And it's very interesting stuff for a kid's show. And
I just wish he had the fashion know how to have goggles.
Well, I mean, that goes without saying. Again, like I said, the big hurdle in my case is the cast simply not being an engaging bunch. So until you get to that point where the plot really kicks in, it is kind of a slug. The stuff that happens exclusively in the real world, which I wanted to like, because I loved Tamers doing all that stuff in the real world. I loved the idea of 02 being in the real world. I wanted to like Savers for having stuff in the real world and didn't. But the stuff that happens in the digital world and the stuff that happens when the digital world and the real world really collide are definitely worth, at the very least, skipping ahead to watch that part, because Savers does something that is one of the most brilliant things I've ever seen a Digimon series do, and I was kicking myself for not having watched it sooner when I finally got to this part, because it's so interesting, surprising, and engaging. And I'm not going to tell you what it is just yet. I'm not leaving that as like a spoiler to go find on your own, although you should watch this stuff on your own. But it'll mean more when I bring it up again as we get into the next season of Digimon.
Cross Wars.
Clip.
No go.
Don't screw with me, you bastards. Just who the hell do you think I am?
I love Cross Wars.
Me too.
This is second only to Tamers as my favorite Digimon series, until something that we'll talk about later. But as it kicks off, Cross Wars is awesome.
When it starts, you're like, first minute of it, all you see is this one silhouette of a guy, and you see Digimon from past series that we love and recognize, and their silhouettes. And he just goes, Digicross! And you're like, what the heck is that? That whole clip was just an homage, and I was like, okay, time to watch the season.
And again, also, Taiki is one of my favorite goggleheads. I went on my little tirade about how, for the most part, I don't like goggleheads. I like Takato because he is the opposite of that. Taiki is an example of how you can take that kind of character and do it well. No, he possesses a lot of the same traits that you see in Tai, but you can actually buy him being a leader. Like his big introductory scene in the first episode is him wearing himself out to the point of collapse to help out the basketball team that he isn't even a part of. They just needed somebody to help out, and he's pretty much single-handedly winning the game, and yet he passes the ball off to the other guy to make the shot. So we know he's selfless, he's smart, or at least he's a good strategist. He's a good leader, and this is something that I wanted to see for so long in a Digimon series, and here he is.
In fact, Cross Wars, you could argue that its theme is how to be a leader, and it's teaching the viewer how you be an effective leader. Because think about it, he has a crossloader filled with Digimon that he has to learn how to utilize for their different skills by crossing them, and basically learning how to deal with his two friends who aren't, they didn't even get crossloads till later. What the heck? I'm sorry, spoiler.
Yeah,
we'll get to that.
Yeah, we're getting ahead of ourselves.
Sorry, I'm just still upset over that.
Yeah, but even the fact that they had kids tagging along in the digital world, they're in the midst of the adventure, who didn't actively
they were companions
in
to
the
his
same
doctor.
way. That's the other thing. Cross Wars found ways of spicing up the formula and doing new things with the basic Digimon ideas that were new enough to be exciting, but didn't like completely right. This wasn't like turning it into Power Rangers all of a sudden and just making it completely, what is this?
Yeah, because the one thing Pokemon has over Digimon is the fact that you have multiple Pokemon, like bunch of them. Digimon only had the whole one partner thing, or you become your own partner. This one with the crossloader, you can have pretty much an army. It's like, we have an army, and I have a crossloader, pretty much. And yes, his main bond was with Shoutmon, but at the same time, he still had all of his friends with him where they needed to go and when they needed. Also, making friends with people who were antagonists. That's usually in Digimon, but even more so in this one. And that's really hard, learning how to work with and then have under your leadership people who used to not like you.
And again, just this fact that there's so many, that this series presented the idea of having numerous parties all working against or around each other for their own ends. The idea that of having the bad guy Digimon not just being the boss at the end of the level that you have to get to, but actually being one of the parties that they're working against. The whole setup of the digital world in this series, again, is very interesting.
It seems more like a JRPG.
Yeah,
one of the good ones.
Yeah, I wouldn't go so. It doesn't reach the point of feeling like a actual existing culture, or like actual world in and of itself. You still are like hopping from level to level, in a sense. But it feels so different. Yeah, it's so rare in this kind of show at all. The show that sells toys to kids doesn't do different and interesting and new very well.
Yeah, I marathoned the first 30 episodes of Cross Wars again for Otakon. I fell in love with it. Cross Wars is like one of the best things that happened to the Digimon franchise. So how did they mess it up?
The executives stepped in. You see, here's the thing. Cross Wars did not have good ratings. There's a whole list of things. It was on a different network from the other series. There's shenanigans. But the point was, not a lot of people watched it, but they were buying the toys. So there was a vested interest in keeping the show going, but the suits looked at the ratings and, this is clearly broken, we need to fix it. And so first we got a second arc, the Death Generals arc, which is okay. It fixes a lot of the stuff that wasn't broken, and it's like the digital world, it turns into exactly what I was talking about in the previous seasons of having. It literally is a series of levels. They start at the first one and have to work their way up, and there's a boss at each one. We don't find out anything about these characters because we only see them the episode they get killed.
It's Mega Man.
At least in Mega Man you can play non-linearly.
That is true.
And it sounds like the strangest thing to ever say in a children's show. The fan service is amped way up.
Yeah, there's some fan service, like in the opening for that one, Rubimon.
They write out a bunch of the other characters, or at least remove the conflict that was there and consolidate them into one team.
But her boobs are like 500 characters alone.
Are we never going to get past that?
Nope.
But still, I would recommend watching it because it is like the natural continuation of the first arc of Cross Wars. If you can watch those two arcs, they are still very good. Not as good at the end, but definitely worth watching. But then they decided to fix stuff again.
Shall I press the button?
Please no. Please no.
What do we have next? Is it the actual clip, or is it the trailer, or what?
God, please no.
Is it the one you edited, or the crossover?
I don't remember now.
Oh God.
What have you done? Well,
It's Sunday.
I'll just say the thing. They did counted in with the same numbering as Cross Wars, but what is the whole long thing? Young Hunters
The
who
young
leapt
hunters
through time?
who leapt through time.
Which doesn't make sense because there's not actually really time travel involved. We just call it Young Hunters.
I just call it hunters.
Yeah, but they did a whole lot of stuff that isn't. I wish I knew which clip you had next.
Well, let's find out. And if it's the wrong one, I can just stop it.
Yes.
Loading, buffering.
Loading, buffering.
Oh, okay. Yes, sir. Yeah.
Yeah. I want to show you this creepy thing.
私自身がクローズなんだからさ。
私はお前にずっと。
No one likes you.
アスタモンは私が最初にデジクローズへ引き込んだデジアスタモンとして私は龍馬の一
I saw that and I was like, okay, it has a mouth like the D Reaper, eyes like an angel from Ava, and it moves like. No, Clip. No.
Okay, so Goggle Kid we saw is a new character called Tagiru, who is introduced essentially to take over the place of Taiki. Yes, actually, that is exactly who he is, and not just the fact that he takes over a character who is infinitely better, but the fact that this is the most annoying little snot you have ever seen. And to have, I mean, it's bad enough just, having characters that you've been watching replaced with new characters, but in this case, they actually have, like I said, I love Taiki. He's one of my favorite Goggleheads. He's a great character. And he's reduced to standing on the sidelines. Not only are we not watching him, when we do see him, he's telling us how awesome this little punk is. And it also doesn't help, at this point, Young Hunters is just bad. It is dull. I mean, it is not as, objectively messy and confusing as 02 gets, but it is boring.
Yeah,
they introduced the plot in the first episode, and it shows up twice, and the rest is just the dullest of little real world vignettes where we watch this new kid we don't care about doing things we don't care about, and it is just we don't care about it. It's boring.
We do disagree on one thing that we were discussing earlier.
Well, okay, I do the
about Tagiru and his character. The way he acts, the way he's energetic and really into doing this and really likes Taiki, it seemed more like a fanboy of the show kind of self-inserted him in fanfic style and took over the thing. And I'm like, so is this some sort of representation of a hardcore Digimon fan?
That's insulting.
It is pretty insulting, but it's a theory I have that's, it's not totally incorrect.
Well, but speaking of fanboys, though, Young Hunters does do one other thing that we need to talk about. So we should let that clip happen, and we'll just sit back and let you see.
Okay, but